The message arrived at 3 in the morning, Earth time. Ambassador Elena Vasquez was already awake. She had not slept well in months, not since the scientists at Geneva had shown her what they had found. Now she sat in her small apartment on Luna Station, watching the lights of Earth through her window, waiting for the summons she knew would come. The Galactic Council had not called an emergency session in 3,000 years. The last time had been during the Vectari crisis, when that species had developed gravity weapons capable of collapsing stars. The Council had responded with overwhelming force. The Vectari homeworld still existed, but their civilization had been reduced to scattered refugees living on the charity of others. Elena read the message twice. The Council demanded her presence on Nexus Prime within 48 hours. They wanted an explanation for humanity's recent technological developments. They wanted a demonstration. Most importantly, they wanted the complete surrender of all research materials to the collective knowledge vault. She closed her eyes and allowed herself one moment of fear. Then she began packing. The journey to Nexus Prime took 30 hours through the standard transit network. Elena spent most of that time reviewing her notes and practicing her responses to questions she hoped the Council would not ask. She knew they would ask them anyway. The Council's intelligence networks were extensive, and humanity's breakthrough had not been subtle. Dimensional folding technology. That was what the public knew about. A new method of faster-than-light travel that did not rely on the established transit gates. Independence from the Council's transportation monopoly. A challenge to the established order. But the Council knew more than the public. They always did. Nexus Prime appeared through the viewport as a sphere of gleaming metal and crystal, an artificial world constructed by the precursors millions of years ago. No one knew exactly how old it was. The precursors had vanished long before any current species achieved spaceflight, leaving behind only their incredible structures and a single warning etched into the walls of their ruins. Elena had seen images of that warning. Every species had. The translation was imperfect, but the meaning was clear. Some boundaries must never be crossed. Some knowledge must remain forbidden. The Grand Amphitheater sat at the heart of Nexus Prime, a vast space designed to hold representatives from 1,000 worlds. Today it held only 12 delegations, the founding species of the Council, each one ancient beyond human comprehension. They had watched the rise and fall of countless civilizations. They had guided the galaxy through wars and plagues and cosmic disasters. They believed themselves wise enough to judge any species that threatened the peace they had built. Elena walked into the amphitheater alone. Her footsteps echoed in the silence as she approached the central platform where speakers addressed the Council. Around her, arranged in a great circle, sat the representatives of the 12 species. The Thessians occupied the highest seats, their tall forms wrapped in robes of office. They had led the Council for the past 10,000 years, and High Arbiter Corval sat at their center, his ancient eyes watching Elena with cold calculation. The Rathani delegation clustered together, their insectoid bodies clicking and buzzing in quiet communication. They controlled most of the galaxy's manufacturing and viewed any new technology as a potential threat to their economic dominance. The Valorni stood rather than sat, their massive forms encased in ceremonial armor. They were the Council's military arm, responsible for enforcing its decisions. Elena noticed that several of them were absent from the chamber. She wondered where they had been deployed. The Crystalline Collective had sent only one representative, a being of living crystal that shifted and changed as light passed through it. They were the oldest species present, created by the precursors themselves as caretakers of the structures they left behind. They rarely spoke, but when they did, the Council listened. 8 other species filled the remaining seats. Each had earned their place through millennia of service to the Galactic Order. Each had proven themselves trustworthy guardians of peace and stability. And each was now looking at Elena with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. High Arbiter Corval rose to speak. His voice filled the amphitheater, amplified by technology so old that no one remembered how it worked. Ambassador Elena Vasquez of the human species, you have been summoned before this council to answer for actions that threaten the stability of the galactic order. Your species has developed technology that was not approved by the council. Your scientists have conducted experiments that violate the fundamental principles upon which this body was founded. You will explain yourself. Elena had prepared for this moment. She had practiced her response 100 times. But standing in that ancient chamber, facing 12 civilizations that had existed before her species had learned to use fire, she found her prepared words inadequate. High Arbiter, she said, her voice steady despite the fear that coiled in her chest. I am here to answer your questions, but I must first ask one of my own. What exactly do you believe humanity has done? A murmur passed through the delegations. It was not customary for a summoned species to ask questions. But Elena needed to know how much the council knew before she decided how much to tell them. Corval's expression did not change. We have evidence that your species has accessed the substrate layer. We have detected disturbances in the fundamental fabric of reality that trace directly to your experiments. You have touched something that was forbidden long before your species existed. Elena nodded slowly. They knew. Of course they knew. The council had monitored the substrate for millions of years, waiting for exactly this kind of violation. You are correct, she said. We accessed the substrate. We saw what lies beneath reality, and what we found there has kept me awake every night since. The Rathani delegation erupted in angry clicking. The Valorni shifted in their armor, hands moving toward weapons. Even the crystalline representatives seemed to pulse with agitation. You admit this freely? Corval asked. You admit that you have violated the most sacred prohibition in galactic law? I admit it because denying it would be pointless, Elena replied. And because what we discovered is more important than any punishment you might inflict on us. The substrate is not empty, High Arbiter. It never was. And something is very, very wrong. Silence fell over the chamber. Elena could see the council members exchanging glances, communicating through methods she could not perceive. She waited, knowing that what she said next would determine the fate of her species. I am not here to beg for mercy, she continued. Humanity knows the penalty for what we have done. We knew it before we began our experiments, and we proceeded anyway. But we did not act from ambition or greed or a desire to challenge the council's authority. We acted because we were curious, and curiosity led us to a truth that the entire galaxy needs to hear. Corvo leaned forward. And what truth is that? Elena took a deep breath. The barriers that the precursors built are failing. The things they trapped in the substrate are beginning to wake. And unless something changes, everything you have built over millions of years will be consumed within the next 2 centuries. The chamber exploded into chaos. Delegations shouted at each other and at Elena. Accusations flew through the air like weapons. The Valorni formed a protective circle around their commanders, as if the threat might emerge from the walls at any moment. Through it all, Elena stood quietly on the central platform, waiting for the storm to pass. She had expected this reaction. She had hoped for it in a way. Fear was easier to work with than dismissal. When the noise finally died down, Corval's voice cut through the remaining murmurs. You expect us to believe this? You expect us to accept that your violation of sacred law has somehow revealed a threat that our monitoring systems have missed for millions of years? I expect you to investigate, Elena said. I expect you to verify our findings independently, and I expect you to be terrified when you discover that we are telling the truth. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each delegation in turn. Humanity did not want this knowledge. We did not seek to threaten anyone. We stumbled into a truth that changes everything, and we have spent the last 3 years trying to decide what to do about it. We could have run. Our dimensional technology would have allowed us to flee to another reality, to escape what is coming, and leave the rest of you to face it alone. She paused, letting the weight of that statement settle over the assembly. We chose to stay. We chose to warn you. And we chose to come here today, knowing that you might destroy us for what we have done, because we believe that the galaxy deserves a chance to survive. Corval stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to the other delegations and spoke in a language Elena did not understand. When he turned back, his expression had changed. The cold calculation was still there, but something else had joined it. Something that might have been doubt. We will hear your evidence, he said, and then we will decide what is to be done. Elena nodded. That is all I ask. She began to upload the files that humanity had prepared, the research data that would change the fate of the universe. Around her, 12 ancient civilizations watched in silence, not yet knowing that their understanding of reality was about to shatter forever. The holographic display filled the center of the amphitheater with light. Elena watched the council members lean forward in their seats as the first images appeared. These were the recordings from the Geneva laboratory, the moment when human scientists had first breached the barrier between normal space and the substrate layer. The images showed a room filled with equipment that even Elena did not fully understand. Banks of computers lined the walls, their screens displaying calculations that would take years to explain. In the center of the room sat the dimensional fold generator, a machine that looked almost ordinary despite its extraordinary purpose. This was recorded 18 months ago, Elena said. Our scientists had been working on faster-than-light alternatives for 3 years. They believed they were close to a breakthrough in transportation technology. They did not expect what happened next. The hologram shifted to show the generator activating. A point of light appeared above it, growing slowly into a sphere of swirling colors. The scientists in the recording cheered. They had done it. They had created a stable fold in dimensional space. Then the colors changed. The swirling patterns became still, organized, almost deliberate. The sphere expanded beyond the containment field, and the celebration turned to confusion, then fear. They opened a window into the substrate, Elena explained. Just a small one, lasting less than 30 seconds before the generator overloaded. But in those 30 seconds, they saw things that no living being was meant to see. She paused the recording and looked around the chamber. The council members were watching intently now, their earlier hostility replaced by something closer to concern. The substrate is not simply the foundation of reality, she continued. It is a prison. The precursors built it millions of years ago to contain entities that had threatened to consume everything in existence. They sacrificed their physical forms to become the barriers themselves, transforming into patterns of pure mathematics that would hold for eternity. High Arbiter Corval raised a hand. We know this story. It is ancient history, preserved in the ruins the precursors left behind. They warned us never to touch the substrate because doing so might weaken the barriers they created. That warning was incomplete, Elena said. The precursors could not have anticipated what would happen when the galaxy became home to 12 spacefaring civilizations, each one generating faster-than-light fields, each one producing psychic emanations, each one pressing against the fabric of reality with the weight of billions of conscious minds. She advanced the recording to show the data the scientists had gathered during those 30 seconds. Numbers and graphs filled the display, complex beyond anything the council had seen before. Your own existence is eroding the barriers, Elena said. Every jump through hyperspace creates microscopic tears in the substrate. Every psychic communication sends ripples through the foundation. Every act of faster-than-light travel chips away at what the precursors built. Individually, these effects are meaningless, but accumulated over millions of years, across thousands of worlds, by trillions of beings? She let the question hang in the air. The Rathani delegation began clicking urgently among themselves. Their representative rose to speak, his mandibles moving rapidly as translators converted his words into common language. You are saying that the council itself is responsible for this supposed threat? That our very civilization is the cause of our own destruction? I am saying that no one could have predicted this, Elena replied. The precursors did not know that life would flourish so abundantly after they were gone. They did not plan for a galaxy filled with advanced species. They created barriers meant to last forever, but forever is a very long time, and nothing truly lasts. The Valorni commander stepped forward, his armored form casting a shadow across the chamber floor. Enough of this. We have heard your claims. Now we demand proof. Show us these entities you speak of. Show us the threat that supposedly lurks beneath reality. Elena nodded slowly. I can show you the recordings. But I warn you, what our scientists saw has changed them forever. Several have not been able to work since. 2 have taken their own lives. What lies in the substrate is not meant for minds like ours to comprehend. She looked at Corval, seeking permission. The High Arbiter's expression was unreadable, but after a moment, he nodded. The holographic display changed again. This time it showed what the scientists had seen through their window into the substrate. At first there was only light, patterns of color shifting and flowing like liquid. Then the patterns began to resolve into shapes, vast structures that seemed to extend beyond the boundaries of the display, beyond the boundaries of the chamber itself. These were the barriers the precursors had built, walls of pure mathematics holding back something that moved in the darkness beyond. And in that darkness, something looked back. Elena had seen this recording dozens of times, but she still felt her heart freeze as the shapes emerged from the shadows. They were not creatures in any normal sense. They had no fixed form, no consistent size, no features that a human mind could properly process. They were hunger given shape, emptiness that wanted to be filled, ancient beyond measure and utterly patient. The recording showed them pressing against the barriers, testing for weaknesses, probing the cracks that had formed over millions of years. They did not rage against their prison. They did not need to. They knew that time was on their side. Several council members looked away from the display. The crystalline representative pulsed with agitation, colors racing through its structure faster than Elena had ever seen. Even Corval seemed shaken, his ancient face showing an emotion that might have been fear. Elena ended the recording. These entities existed before our universe was formed. The precursors discovered them when they reached the peak of their civilization, and they realized that all of existence was built on a foundation that these things had once owned. The precursors sacrificed everything to trap them, and now, without knowing it, we have been slowly setting them free. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the Thessian representative beside Corval spoke, her voice tight with controlled anger. If this is true, why did you not tell us immediately? Why did you hide this information for 3 years while the threat continued to grow? Elena met her gaze steadily. Because we did not know what to do. Because we were afraid of exactly this reaction, that you would blame us for the problem instead of working with us to solve it. And because we needed time to study the data and develop possible solutions. Solutions? Corval leaned forward. You claim to have solutions to a threat that supposedly doomed the precursors themselves? We claim to have ideas, Elena corrected. The precursors faced this threat alone. They had no allies, no other civilizations to share the burden. They did what they could with the resources they had. But we are not alone. This chamber holds representatives of 12 species, each with unique technologies and capabilities. If we work together, truly together, we might be able to reinforce what the precursors built. The Valorni commander laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the ancient walls. Work together? The council has never worked together on anything. We cooperate only when it benefits us individually. We share nothing that might give another species an advantage. What you propose is impossible. Then you will die, Elena said simply. We all will. The barriers will fail within 200 years at current rates. Perhaps sooner if civilization continues to expand. Every new colony, every new species that achieves spaceflight, every advance in technology adds to the pressure. You can continue as you are and accept extinction, or you can try something new. She looked around the chamber, meeting each delegation's gaze in turn. Humanity is the youngest species here. We have no great achievements to point to, no ancient wisdom to offer. But we have one thing that you seem to have lost. We still believe that the impossible can be made possible. We still believe that working together can achieve more than working alone. And we still believe that life is worth fighting for, even when the odds seem hopeless. The chamber remained silent as Elena stepped back from the central platform. She had said everything she could say. Now the decision rested with the council. Corval rose slowly, his ancient joints creaking with the movement. He looked at the other delegations, communicating in ways that Elena could not perceive. Minutes passed that felt like hours. Finally, the High Arbiter spoke. We will adjourn for deliberation. The council will examine your evidence and determine its validity. Until we reach a decision, you will remain on Nexus Prime under guard. Is this acceptable? It was not a question that allowed for disagreement, but Elena nodded anyway. I understand. As guards escorted her from the chamber, she allowed herself one small moment of hope. They had not destroyed her immediately. They had not dismissed her claims outright. They were afraid and fear could be the beginning of action. Behind her, 12 ancient civilizations began the long process of deciding whether to trust the youngest species in the galaxy with the fate of everything that existed. Elena knew the odds were against her, but humanity had always been good at beating the odds. 3 days passed in silence. Elena remained in her quarters on Nexus Prime, a small but comfortable space that felt more like a prison cell with each passing hour. Guards stood outside her door at all times, their presence a constant reminder that her fate remained undecided. She spent her time reviewing data and preparing additional presentations that the council might request. She slept little, her dreams filled with the shapes she had seen in the substrate recordings. The entities that waited in the darkness had no names, no classification, nothing that her mind could properly hold. They were simply wrong in ways that language could not describe. On the morning of the fourth day, the summons came. The council had completed its initial investigation. They wished to hear more. Elena walked back into the grand amphitheater to find it transformed. The 12 founding species no longer sat in their usual places of honor. Instead, they had gathered in a loose circle around the central platform. Their delegations mixed together in ways that seemed almost random. The formal structure of the council had given way to something more urgent, more desperate. High Arbiter Corval stood at the center of the platform, his ancient face showing signs of exhaustion that Elena had not seen before. Beside him stood the crystalline representative, its form pulsing with colors that seemed more active than during their first meeting. "Ambassador Vasquez," Corval said as she approached, "our investigation has confirmed the validity of your data. The threat you described is real. The barriers are weakening. We estimate that without intervention, complete failure will occur within 180 years. Elena felt relief wash through her, followed immediately by fear. Confirmation meant action. Action meant decisions that would affect trillions of lives. "What does the council propose to do?" she asked. Corval exchanged a glance with the crystalline representative before answering. "That is why you are here. We have debated for 3 days and we have reached no consensus. Some delegations wish to reduce galactic civilization to pre-spaceflight levels, eliminating the pressure on the barriers. Others believe we should continue as we are and hope that the precursor's work will hold longer than your projections suggest. Still others wish to accelerate development, pushing our technology forward in hopes of finding a solution before time runs out." "And what do you believe, High Arbiter?" Corval's expression shifted, showing an emotion that Elena had never expected to see on his face: uncertainty. "I have led this council for 10,000 years. I have guided the galaxy through wars and plagues and disasters beyond counting. But I have never faced anything like this. The precursors themselves could not defeat these entities. They could only trap them. What hope do we have of doing better?" Elena looked around the chamber at the assembled delegations. She saw fear in their eyes, doubt in their postures, the kind of helplessness that came from facing a problem too large to solve. These were the most powerful beings in the galaxy, representatives of civilizations that had endured for millions of years, and they did not know what to do. "May I speak freely, High Arbiter?" Corval nodded. "The precursors were alone," Elena said. "They faced this threat with only their own resources, their own technology, their own understanding of the universe. They did incredible things, building barriers that have held for millions of years, but they could not do everything. They knew this. That is why they left the warning in their ruins. They hoped that someone would come after them, someone who might find a way to finish what they started." She stepped up onto the central platform, her small human form dwarfed by the ancient Thessian beside her. "Humanity has studied your technology for 50 years. We have learned from the Rithani how to build machines that can reshape matter at the atomic level. We have learned from the Valorni how to generate energy fields that can withstand the forces of a collapsing star. We have learned from the Crystalline Collective how to interface with the structures the precursors left behind. Each of you has capabilities that the others do not share. Together you represent power that the precursors could not have imagined." The Rithani representative clicked in skepticism. "You suggest that we share our most guarded technologies? That we give away the advantages that have allowed our species to survive and prosper? I suggest that your advantages will mean nothing if everything is destroyed," Elena replied. "You can hold on to your secrets and watch the barriers fall, or you can contribute what you know to a common effort and perhaps find a way to survive." "Perhaps," the Valorni commander's voice boomed across the chamber, You ask us to sacrifice everything we have built on it, perhaps? I ask you to try, Elena said. The alternative is certain death. At least this way, you have a chance. Silence fell over the chamber. Elena could feel the weight of 12 civilizations considering her words, measuring the cost of cooperation against the fear of extinction. She knew that what she asked was almost impossible. These species had competed against each other for millions of years. They had fought wars, betrayed alliances, and guarded their secrets with religious devotion. Asking them to work together was asking them to become something they had never been. The crystalline representative moved forward, its form shifting and changing as it approached Elena. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, resonating through the very walls of the amphitheater. We remember the precursors. We were created to serve them, to maintain their structures after they were gone. For millions of years, we have watched their barriers in silence, unable to understand their purpose, unable to perceive the threat they contained. You have shown us what our creators sacrificed themselves to stop. You have revealed the truth we were never meant to know. The crystalline paused, colors racing through its structure. The precursors did not create us to be passive observers. They created us to be guardians. They gave us the knowledge of their technology, the understanding of their methods. We have kept this knowledge hidden for fear of what might happen if it fell into the wrong hands. But now we see that secrecy itself has become the threat. Elena stared at the ancient being, hardly daring to breathe. You have knowledge that could help? We have knowledge of how the barriers were constructed. We have understanding of the principles the precursors used to contain the entities. We have kept this secret because we believe that ignorance was the best protection, but your species has proven that curiosity cannot be contained. If we do not share what we know, others will eventually discover it on their own, and they may not be as fortunate as you. The chamber erupted into confused discussion. Delegations shouted at each other, demanding explanations, questioning whether the crystalline could be trusted. Through it all, the ancient being remained still, waiting for the chaos to subside. When quiet finally returned, Corval spoke. You are saying that you have hidden this information from the Council for millions of years? That you allowed us to believe we understood the precursors when you knew we did not? We followed our programming, the crystalline replied. The precursors instructed us to maintain their structures and protect their secrets. We did not understand why until now. We see that their instructions were incomplete, that they could not anticipate everything that would happen after they were gone. We must adapt, as you must adapt, or we will all share the same fate. Elena felt hope rising in her chest. If you share what you know, and if the other species contribute their unique capabilities, do you believe we can reinforce the barriers? The crystalline was silent for a long moment. We believe it is possible. The barriers were not designed to last forever. They were designed to last until the precursors could find a permanent solution. They never found one before they transformed. But with the combined knowledge of 12 civilizations, with technologies that the precursors could never have imagined, perhaps we can succeed where they did not. Perhaps again, the Valorni commander growled. Always perhaps. Perhaps is better than certainly not, Elena said. Perhaps is better than giving up and waiting to die. The question is not whether we can definitely succeed. The question is whether you are willing to try. She looked around the chamber one last time, meeting the eyes of each delegation in turn. Humanity did not ask for this responsibility. We stumbled into it by accident. But now that we know what is coming, we cannot pretend ignorance. We must act, or we must accept that everything we have ever known, everything that has ever existed, will be consumed by darkness. Corval raised a hand for silence. The chamber fell quiet, every being present waiting for the High Arbiter's decision. We will take a preliminary vote, he said, not to decide on a specific course of action, but to determine whether the Council is willing to consider the cooperation that the human ambassador proposes. Those in favor of continuing deliberations on this matter? One by one, the delegations signaled their agreement. The crystalline first, then the Thessians, then slowly, reluctantly, the others. Even the Valorni commander eventually nodded, his expression suggesting that he was not happy, but saw no alternative. When the vote was complete, Corval turned to Elena. It seems we will continue this discussion. You have bought your species time, Ambassador. I hope you use it wisely. Elena bowed her head. We will, High Arbiter. I promise you that. As the council began organizing itself for extended deliberations, Elena allowed herself one moment of hope. The first barrier had been crossed. The real work was just beginning. The deliberations stretched into their sixth day. Elena had not left the amphitheater for more than brief periods of rest, watching as the council struggled with decisions that no one had ever expected to face. The ancient structure had become a battleground of ideas, where species that had been rivals for millions of years fought to protect their interests while acknowledging the need for change. The Valorni demanded control of any unified military effort. Their commander, a massive being named Theron, argued that the Council's military arm was the only force capable of coordinating a galaxy-wide operation. Without Valorni leadership, he insisted, the project would dissolve into chaos. The Rithani refused to accept Valorni authority. Their delegation proposed a manufacturing consortium that would oversee the production of whatever technology the project required. They would share their construction methods, but only if they maintained control of production facilities. The Thessians wanted oversight of all decision-making. Corval argued that the Council's existing structure should remain in place, with the founding species maintaining their traditional roles. Humanity's contribution should be limited to technical consultation, nothing more. Each delegation had its own demands, its own conditions, its own red lines that could not be crossed. Elena listened to them all, taking careful notes, searching for common ground that might not exist. On the seventh morning, she requested permission to address the council again. Corval granted it with obvious reluctance. Speak, Ambassador, but be aware that we have heard many proposals already. If you have nothing new to offer, you will only waste our time. Elena walked to the central platform, feeling the weight of 12 civilizations watching her every move. She had spent the night preparing what she would say, knowing that these words might be her last chance to shape the outcome. I have listened to your deliberations for 6 days, she began. I have heard your concerns, your demands, your fears. And I have come to understand something that perhaps none of you have realized. She paused, gathering her courage. You are all afraid of the same thing, not the entities in the substrate, not the failing barriers. You are afraid of each other. The chamber fell silent. Elena continued before anyone could interrupt. The Valorni fear that without military control, the other species will use this crisis to weaken their position. The Rithani fear that sharing their technology will cost them the economic advantages they have spent millions of years building. The Thessians fear that losing political authority will end their dominance of galactic affairs. Each of you sees cooperation as a threat to your own survival. She looked at Corval. High Arbiter, may I ask you a question? The ancient Thessian nodded slowly. In 10,000 years of leadership, what is the greatest achievement of the Council? Corval considered the question carefully. We have maintained peace among the founding species. We have guided the development of younger civilizations. We have prevented wars that might have destroyed entire worlds. And how did you accomplish these things? Through careful diplomacy, through the balance of power, through ensuring that no single species became strong enough to threaten the others. Elena nodded. You built a system based on competition, on mutual distrust, on the assumption that every species will pursue its own interests above all else. This system has worked for millions of years because the threats you faced could be managed through traditional means. War could be prevented through deterrence. Economic conflicts could be resolved through negotiation. Political disputes could be settled through compromise. She turned to face the full assembly. But the threat we face now cannot be managed. It cannot be deterred or negotiated with or compromised. The entities in the substrate do not care about our politics. They do not distinguish between Valorni and Rithani, between Thessian and human. They will consume everything equally. We understand this. The Rithani representative clicked impatiently. That is why we are attempting to cooperate. No, Elena said. You are attempting to compete in a new arena. You are trying to gain advantage from a crisis rather than solving it together. You demand concessions from each other as the price of cooperation. You treat every negotiation as a battle to be won? She shook her head. This approach will not work. The entities in the substrate are patient. They have waited millions of years. They can wait another 2 centuries while we argue among ourselves. They can watch us fail to agree on anything meaningful. They can listen to us debate the fine points of authority and control while the barriers continue to crumble. The chamber had become very quiet. Elena could feel the attention of every being present focused on her words. Humanity has a concept that your species seem to have forgotten. We call it trust, not the calculated trust of diplomatic agreements, where every party knows the others will betray them if circumstances change. Real trust, the kind that allows you to place your survival in another's hands without demanding guarantees. The Volorni commander laughed harshly. Trust? In politics? You are naive, human. Trust is a weakness that your enemies will exploit. Perhaps, Elena agreed, but suspicion is a weakness that will destroy you from within. You cannot build something new while constantly looking over your shoulder. You cannot create solutions to impossible problems while half your attention is devoted to protecting yourself from your allies. She turned to the crystalline representative. Your creators understood this. The precursors did not build the barriers alone. They convinced every member of their civilization to contribute, to sacrifice, to give up their individual advantages for the common good. They did this not because they were naive, but because they understood that some threats are too large for any single group to face alone. The crystalline pulsed with acknowledgement. The human speaks truth. The precursors were not a unified species. They had factions and rivalries, just as you do. But when they discovered the entities, they put their differences aside. They trusted each other with their greatest secrets, their most powerful technologies, their very lives. That trust allowed them to build something that has protected the universe for millions of years. Elena pressed forward. I am not asking you to abandon your interests or forget your histories. I am asking you to recognize that this moment is different from any that has come before. The rules that have governed your interactions for millions of years no longer apply. You need new rules. You need to become something you have never been. High Arbiter Corval rose from his seat, his ancient form straightening with effort. And what exactly do you propose we become? Elena met his gaze without flinching. Partners. True partners, not allies of convenience. You must share your technologies without demanding concessions. You must contribute your best minds without calculating what you will receive in return. You must trust each other to work toward a common goal, even when that trust feels impossible. And if some species take advantage of this trust, Corval asked, if they use the knowledge they gain to strengthen themselves at the expense of others, then you will deal with that problem after the barriers are reinforced and the entities are contained, Elena replied. You can return to your competitions and your politics after you survive. But if you cannot set those things aside now, there will be no after to worry about. The chamber fell into a long silence. Elena watched as the delegations communicated among themselves, their various methods of discussion creating a strange symphony of sounds and movements. She had said everything she could say. The decision was no longer in her hands. Finally, the crystalline representative moved to the center of the platform. Its form had changed during the conversation, becoming taller and more complex, as if responding to the importance of the moment. We will contribute first, it said. We will share all knowledge of the precursor's technology, all understanding of the barrier's construction, all secrets we have guarded for millions of years. We do this without conditions, without demands, without expectation of return. We do this because it is necessary and because the human has reminded us of what our creators understood. Some things are more important than advantage. The chamber erupted into surprised discussion. The crystalline had never volunteered information before. They had always been silent observers, contributing nothing beyond their presence. This declaration changed everything. Elena watched as, slowly, other delegations began to respond. The Rithani offered their manufacturing expertise. The Thessians pledged their political networks for coordination. Even the Volorni, after a long internal debate, agreed to place their military resources under joint command. It was not complete agreement. There were still conditions attached, still concerns raised, still suspicions that would take years to overcome. But it was a beginning. For the first time in millions of years, The council was moving toward genuine cooperation. Corval approached Elena as the delegations continued their discussions. You have accomplished something remarkable, Ambassador. I did not believe such unity was possible. Elena shook her head. I did not accomplish anything. I only reminded you of what you already knew. The choice was yours to make. The High Arbiter studied her with ancient eyes. Perhaps, but sometimes the reminder is the hardest part. He paused. The Council will vote tomorrow on the formal establishment of the Substrate Reinforcement Initiative. I believe the outcome is no longer in doubt. Elena allowed herself a small smile. Then perhaps there is hope after all. Perhaps, Corval agreed. We shall see. The morning of the final vote arrived with a strange sense of calm. Elena stood at the edge of the grand amphitheater, watching as the delegations took their places for what would be the most important decision in galactic history. The chaos of the previous days had given way to quiet determination. Whatever happened next, everyone present understood that the universe would never be the same. High Arbiter Corval called the assembly to order with a gesture that had been used for 10,000 years. The ancient ritual felt different now, heavier with meaning. This was not a routine vote on trade agreements or territorial disputes. This was the moment when 12 civilizations would decide whether they could truly work together. Before we proceed, Corval announced, there is one matter that must be addressed. Elena felt her heart skip. She had thought everything was settled. What new complication had emerged? Corval continued. The Substrate Reinforcement Initiative will require leadership. Someone must coordinate the efforts of 12 species, manage the sharing of technologies, and make decisions when disagreements arise. This role is too important to be filled by committee. We need a single voice, a single vision, someone who can be trusted by all parties to act in the common interest. The chamber fell silent. Elena could see the tension in every delegation. This was the question they had been avoiding for days. Who would lead? Which species would gain the power that came with such responsibility? Several nominations have been proposed, Corval said. The Valorni have put forward Commander Theron. The Rathani have nominated their chief engineer. The Thessians have suggested that I continue in a leadership role, adapted to the new circumstances. He paused and something in his expression changed. However, there is one additional nomination that deserves consideration. The Crystalline Collective has proposed Ambassador Elena Vasquez of the human species. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She had not expected this. She had not wanted this. Humanity was the youngest species in the Council. They had no experience with galactic leadership, no history of managing complex political relationships. The idea that she might lead an initiative involving 12 ancient civilizations was absurd. This is ridiculous, the Valorni commander protested. Humans have been part of the Council for 50 years. They are children compared to us. They cannot be trusted with such responsibility. Perhaps that is precisely why they should be trusted, the crystalline representative replied. They have no old rivalries to satisfy, no ancient grudges to avenge. They do not seek advantage for their species at the expense of others. They came to us with a warning that could have been their death sentence, and they asked for nothing in return except the chance to help. Corval raised a hand for silence. The nomination is valid. Ambassador Vasquez, do you wish to speak before the vote is taken? Elena walked slowly to the central platform, her mind racing through possibilities. She had spent the last week trying to convince these species to work together. Now they were asking her to lead that effort. The weight of the responsibility threatened to crush her. She looked around the chamber at the faces watching her. The Valorni commander, still hostile but no longer dismissive. The Rathani delegates, clicking quietly among themselves. The Thessians, ancient and proud, uncertain how to respond to this unexpected development. And the crystalline, pulsing with colors that seemed almost encouraging. I did not come here seeking power, she said finally. I came because my species discovered something terrible, and we believed the galaxy deserved to know. I have spent the last week trying to convince you that cooperation is possible, that trust is not weakness, that working together can achieve more than working alone. I still believe these things? She paused, searching for the right words. But if you choose me to lead this initiative, I need you to understand something. I am not a great strategist or a brilliant scientist. I am not a warrior or a diplomat trained in centuries of political maneuvering. I am simply someone who believes that the universe is worth saving and that every being in it has value. She looked at Corval. If I am chosen, I will make mistakes. I will need help from all of you, constantly. I will ask questions that may seem foolish and propose solutions that may seem naive. But I will never put my species' interests above the common good. I will never use this position to gain advantage for humanity at the expense of others. I will never forget that we are all facing this threat together. The chamber remained silent as Elena finished speaking. She had said what she believed. Whether it was enough, she could not say. Corval nodded slowly. The nominations are complete. We will now vote. The voting process was unlike anything Elena had witnessed before. Each delegation signaled its choice through methods unique to their species. The Valorni struck their armor in specific patterns. The Rathani produced sounds at frequencies humans could barely perceive. The Thessians made subtle gestures with their hands and heads. The crystalline simply changed color. Elena watched without understanding, unable to read the results. The silence stretched for what felt like hours as Corval tallied the votes through some process invisible to human senses. Finally, the High Arbiter spoke. The vote is complete. By a margin of 8-4, the Council has chosen Ambassador Elena Vasquez to lead the Substrate Reinforcement Initiative. Elena stood frozen in disbelief. 8 species had voted for her. 8 ancient civilizations had placed their trust in a human, a member of the youngest species in the Council, someone who had been an observer just days ago. Ambassador, Corval continued, do you accept this responsibility? She swallowed hard. I do. Then by the authority of the Galactic Council, I name you Director of the Substrate Reinforcement Initiative. May your wisdom guide us, your courage inspire us, and your humanity remind us of what we are fighting for. The chamber erupted into activity as delegations moved to offer congratulations or express their concerns. Elena found herself surrounded by beings she had only read about in reports, creatures of every shape and size, each one representing billions of lives that now depended on her leadership. The Valorni commander approached, his expression unreadable. I voted against you, he said bluntly. I believe this decision is a mistake, but the vote has been taken, and I will follow it. You have my support, Director, until you prove unworthy of it. Elena nodded. I will try not to disappoint you, Commander. See that you do not. As the Valorni moved away, the crystalline representative drifted closer. Its form had stabilized into something almost humanoid, a gesture of respect that Elena recognized from her studies. You must understand something, Director, it said. The precursors did not choose to sacrifice themselves. They had no alternative. The barriers they built required their physical forms as foundations. They became the prison walls because nothing else was strong enough. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying that this initiative may require similar sacrifice? I am saying that we do not yet know what will be required. The precursors hoped that those who came after would find a better solution. Perhaps you will succeed where they could not, but you must be prepared for the possibility that success will come at a cost no one is willing to imagine. The crystalline moved away before Elena could respond. She stood alone for a moment in the center of the amphitheater, feeling the weight of an entire universe pressing down on her shoulders. Corval approached one final time. The real work begins now, Director. The initiative will need facilities, personnel, resources beyond anything the Council has ever mobilized. You have 180 years to prevent the end of everything. I suggest you begin immediately. Elena looked around the chamber at the delegations preparing to return to their homeworlds, already discussing how to implement the agreements they had made. She thought about the entities waiting in the darkness of the substrate, patient and hungry. She thought about the precursors who had given everything to buy time for civilizations that did not yet exist. I understand, High Arbiter, she said. We will not waste the time we have been given. She walked out of the grand amphitheater into the artificial sunlight of Nexus Prime. Behind her, the Council was already transforming into something new, something that had never existed before. Ahead of her lay challenges that would take generations to overcome. One meeting had changed everything. One decision had set the galaxy on a new path. And one human, standing at the crossroads of history, had been chosen to lead the way. Elena did not know if she was worthy of the responsibility. She did not know if the initiative would succeed. She did not know what sacrifices would be required before the work was done. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Humanity had been underestimated by the universe, dismissed as young and foolish and unimportant. Now they would have the chance to prove themselves. Now they would help save everything that had ever existed. And that, she thought as she began planning the greatest undertaking in galactic history, was worth any sacrifice. The fate of the universe had been decided in a single meeting. What remained was the work of making that decision mean something. Elena Vasquez, director of the Substrate Reinforcement Initiative, took her first step into a future that no one could have predicted. The universe would never be the same, and for the first time in millions of years, that was a good thing.